Greetings everybody, Cabinet 23rd of November, and first of all welcome to the Best Value Council in the whole of the United Kingdom, which has been announced today by Empower, which we're kind of proud of. And also before we start, can I say to our American audience, I hope you enjoyed Thanksgiving yesterday, and to the rest of you, welcome to Black Monday. Black Friday, sorry. That gag went down very badly. I can guarantee you there are no special offers on this agenda, though. Anyway, remember we're broadcast live via the website and archived so you can view my mistakes afterwards. Please remember microphones on and off when people have finished, when you speak and when you've finished. So apologies, I don't think we have any. Agenda item 1 is the minutes, proposed motion. I move the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October 2018 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Agreed. All agreed? Thank you. Urgent items, we have none. Declarations of interest. I take it that myself and other Cabinet members who are also members of a district council have a personal interest in the report on the Strategic Growth Plan, agenda item 4 on the agenda. Is there any other declarations? No, so just those, Jenny. So first one is a big one. Leicester and Leicester Strategic Growth Plan, consideration of a revised plan for approval. Tom Pennell's here somewhere. There he is. First report seeks approval for the growth plan. We looked at the draft in March and it's been out for extensive consultation. This is the final version. It's being submitted to each partner council for approval. I've already seen it at North West. The growth plan gives us a long-term strategy for development, ensures we can meet housing provision requirements and will help support bids for government funding. Tom, you're going to introduce it. Tom is the Assistant Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the report provides the Cabinet with the opportunity to consider the proposed final strategic growth plan. As you'll be aware, the process of preparing the SGP has been a long one, dating back to 2015, and the Cabinet has considered the plan at several of its previous meetings, beginning in June 2016 and most recently in March of this year. Throughout the process, the Scrutiny Commission has also considered the emerging plan, including on the 31st of October when it considered this proposed final version, and there have also been 4 all-member briefings during that period. The plan is a collaborative effort of the 9 local authorities and the LEP, overseen by the Members' Advisory Group, which Mr Rhodes represents the Council on, and which the Leader has been attending meetings of in recent months. It's a key piece of work demonstrating that the authorities have fulfilled their duty to cooperate on strategic planning issues, but perhaps more importantly than that, it's a key document to help the area plan effectively for its future, setting a strategic policy context for local plans. The proposed plan is attached as Appendix A, with Appendix B summarising the changes made following the consultation exercise. There's also a risk assessment attached at Appendix C. The plan's underpinned by a strong evidence base, including a housing and economic development needs assessment, and taking that evidence into account, the plan sets out a strategy for the growth and development of the area for Leicester and Leicestershire up to 2050, with housing and employment figures provided for the periods 2011 to 31 and then from 31 to 50. For the period up to 2031, it's considered that the existing and emerging local plans and planning permissions will meet the housing requirements identified. So it's for the period beyond 2031 where the plan makes more fundamental proposals, if you like, concentrating development into a number of strategic growth locations as set out in paragraph 2.7. That is in the City of Leicester, along a new A46 growth corridor, at the Leicestershire International Gateway in the north of the county around the airport area, along an A5 improvement corridor, and at Melton Mowbray. Without such a strategic approach being taken, housing development would be more widely scattered, with towns and smaller settlements across the county having to be expanded in a way that wouldn't easily be supported by the roads, schools and other infrastructure needed to support growth. The plan was subject to public consultation at the start of the year, and that process is summarised in paragraph 30, and paragraph 31 summarises the changes made to the plan in response to the comments made. I'll perhaps just refer to two, which are particularly worth noting, and that's the redesignation of Lutterworth and the reallocation of housing between Harborough, Melton and North West Leicestershire districts. The Scrutiny Commission's comments are set out in Appendix D, which starts at page 65 of the papers. There was some discussion about the status of recent demographic data issued by the Office of National Statistics, and it was confirmed that the plan is fully consistent with recent government guidance regarding the use of household projections. There was a particular request shown at Resolution B on page 67 that the plan be amended to incorporate arrangements for reviewing the plan. My advice is that this matter is best picked up through the ongoing work of the Members' Advisory Group, on which the County Council is represented by Mr Rhodes. Subject to the plan being approved by all partners, the Members' Advisory Group will be considering the implementation and future review of the SGP at its next meetings in the new year. Seeking a change to the plan at this stage, would delay its approval by all of the partners, and I don't think that's necessary to ensure that appropriate review arrangements are put in place. Recommendations as on the order paper.
Good, thanks for that, Tom. Well, I'm happy with the recommendations. I want to place on record my thanks to the Members' Advisory Group, the districts, the City Council, the Scrutiny Commission and the LEP. This is, as you said, Tom, a key piece of work, setting out strategy for the exceedingly long term, which a lot of the members of the public struggle to grasp the concept. But it is strategic. It does set out where the large amounts of houses could go. And the idea of it is if we be strategic, we get strategic infrastructure. If we don't have a long-term plan, we get all the houses scattered willy-nilly across the whole of the county, and all the people in small villages will end up with 50, 60, 70 or 100 houses on the village with no infrastructure. So although in some parts of the county this will be a difficult pill to swallow, I think it's well worth swallowing because it will be for the long-term benefit of the residents and the businesses of Leicestershire going forward. So I'm happy with it, and I thank the people for the good work they've done, because it is certainly recognised, certainly at Midlands Engine and above and beyond through government, that we are groundbreakers and pioneers in doing this piece of work. So I'm really, really kind of proud of it, and I'm happy to move it.
Yes, and I'm equally happy to second it. This is a marvellous piece of work, I think, which has taken quite some time to put together, and there's so much effort gone into and thought gone into bringing it about. There are some people who think that you don't have to plan for housing growth and for other growth, and things will remain just the same as they've always been. But there's a growing population in this country, and Leicestershire will have a growing population just like most other areas of the country. And that's what we have to plan for, not just for the next few years as the local plans do, up to either 2031 or 2036, because they vary in the length of their time that they span. But beyond that to the 2050. And we need this strategic plan, because we need to be able to plan for the infrastructure that we will need, or our successors will need. I won't be around in 2050 to continue to live in Leicestershire. So it's the vision for growth. A lot of people have said, well, it doesn't contain the detail, about where the new road which is being suggested should go, and why haven't you got the line of it in there, and other silly things like that. Well, these sort of things come along later by the nature of things. You start with a vision, you start with a strategy, develop it into a strategy, and then you move forward from there to develop the detailed plans and break them down. And all of this takes time and takes a lot of effort. But it's been a pleasure working on the MAG to bring this about over the last few years, and we'll continue to develop this piece of work. So, as I said, I'm happy to second the motion, and which is for this council to. Or the Cabinet and the Council to approve this. And I hope we get unanimous consent, which I'm sure we shall.
Thank you. I have no other speakers, so it's moved by me, seconded by Byron. All in favour? Thank you. Excuse me, Blake wants to make a declaration. He's forgotten, Jenny. Blake.
Jenny, just a very quick one. On the performance report, it is a retrospective report, but I should really declare a personal interest in a transport issue because it does cover transportation and specifically has references to taxes within the compendium. So if I can just declare a personal non-pecuniary in that respect, thanks.
Great. Agenda item 5. It's not a good day for me. Is the annual delivery report and performance compendium. We've got Andy Brown here for his day in the sun. Nice to see you, Andy. You're going to show us how we've performed. I've already alluded earlier on to the Empower one, but this is your internal report, so over to you. We're doing pretty well for saying we've got no money, but I'm sure we'd be able to do even better if we had some money.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Agenda item 5 presents in two separate but interrelated parts the Draft County Council Annual Delivery Report and Performance Compendium for 2018. The first part on delivery focuses largely on activity over the last 12 months or so to deliver against the priorities and outcomes in the strategic plan to 2022 and other main service strategies. And the Performance Compendium, Part B, sets out the Council's overall performance using a range of benchmarking and end-of-year data, as well as looking at the impact of continued low comparative funding of the County Council and the impact of austerity. In relation to Part A on delivery, I think there's been some really great work that has gone on this year right across the Council under tight revenue resource constraints to support delivery of the new outcomes framework, as well as significant work to transform services, target reduction and reduce resources to maximum effect and to make savings and mitigate the impact of cuts on service users and residents. The report, for example, includes a full section this year on delivery of the new communities theme priority, drawing on a variety of work taking place to support the refreshed community strategy and lever resources to support outcomes such as more volunteers within communities. And also a new corporate focus has been established in relation to the delivery of the quality and affordable homes outcome, with a new chapter setting out some of the work to progress delivery in that area to date. The report's also got substantial sections on the economy and transport, health and wellbeing and safer communities, children and families, with less of a focus this year on the enable activity in the back office, which supports delivery of the outcomes, not because there's any less activity going on, but because we can focus more on the outcomes for residents. So just to pick out some of the highlights this year, there's been further development of the local enterprise zones, new workspaces in Colville and Market Harbour planned, superfast broadband rollout and support for skills development around the Segro Logistics Park and HS2, support for more apprenticeships and a new adult learning strategy, and securing of £5.5 million funds to provide one-to-one business advice and £2.5 million for business growth grants, and continued support to rural business through the LEADER programme. And also significant transport projects this year, totaling in excess of £360 million have been set out, and since 2014 over £120 million secured to invest in supporting growth and transport infrastructure. Schemes such as the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, improvements around Hinckley, M1 Junction 23, Ashby and the A46, as well as work progressing on improvements in traffic management in towns, tackling school parking problems, new school clear zones and the new speed cameras. In relation to health and care, there's been a focus on reducing delayed transfers of care, which has seen considerable reductions in delays due to adult social care reasons, more integration of services with the NHS, such as integrated locality teams, improvements for carers, the proposals for short breaks facilities, extra care accommodation development, learning disabilities housing and homes for adults with disabilities, whole life disability strategy, the social isolation project, and moves to strengthen the social care workforce. And in public health, a new self-care campaign moves towards the integrated healthy lifestyle service, mental health, ill health and suicide prevention work, and physical activity and sports support. For the area around children, there's been a new enhanced educational effectiveness team, 1,100 new school places, a new school in Birstall, improvements in first response services and through the Ofsted Inspection Action Plan, SEND improvements through dedicated placements team, and work around the early help offer and the new family wellbeing service. And the environment strategy has been launched with 100% clean energy commitment, as well as new plans around green energy, solar farm and the new FOSS energy supply company. So a lot of really positive, considerable delivery in 2017-18, with a strong focus on use of capital resources, and a lot of credit to the council, lead members and all the officers that have been involved in delivering that progress in the last year. Particularly more so when you consider some of the pressures and issues affecting other counties around the country and the county's low revenue funding. In relation to the overall performance position, as you mentioned, Empower yesterday reported the council as the most productive council in the country for the second year running. So really positive news and a reflection of what you are achieving with that low funding and the outcomes you're getting. We calculated we were 6th performing county overall in 2016-17 and probably a similar position in 17-18. We've seen 76 service metrics improve this year, but also 59 that have declined, albeit some from a small decline and from a reasonable base. But we are continuing to strengthen oversight and seek improvement and monitoring around those areas that are seeing some decline to make sure that doesn't continue and there is some improvement. So whilst there are a lot of positives in the report and there's been good delivery through securing extra income, I think it's also important not to hide some of the real pressures, risks and issues highlighted in Part B of the report, both nationally and locally, which are of considerable concern for how performance may well unfold in the future based on current funding expectations. Indeed, in Part B, it identifies the list of counties so far that have declared serious financial challenges that continues to grow, including Northamptonshire, Somerset, Lancashire, East Sussex, Shropshire, Buckinghamshire, West Sussex, Suffolk and Surrey, with some now moving towards providing services only to the statutory minimum. And the core spending power chart shows Leicestershire continues to be the lowest funded county. There's rising demand, which requires growth of £41 million across a range of services, and more difficult decisions to come on top of those that have already been taken. So likely future savings requirements and transformation needs are set out in the report. The National Audit Office in the spring reported the financial position of the sector had worsened markedly, particularly for authorities with social care responsibilities, with signs of real financial pressure and trends that were not sustainable over the medium term. The trajectory being towards a narrow core offer focused increasingly on social care. And CIPFA and the Institute for Government have also raised concerns regarding social care and libraries and growing recruitment retention difficulties, with national spending on health crowding out other spending, and local spending on care crowding out other services such as libraries, waste and trading standards. And the Care Quality Commission has also highlighted national challenges around demand and funding workforce problems having a direct impact on care, with a fragile adult social care market. Pressures on children's social care are also there, with low comparative funding for public health and trading standards, also creating additional delivery pressures. So all of the above, as well as some of the service reductions and increased local tax, has seen a slight reduction in satisfaction with the council overall this year, albeit that it remains in much better than many areas. And there are also a heightened number of areas of risk set out in the report, and ongoing risk management also in place, with the continued performance focus needed in the areas set out in paragraph 46. So the successful outcome to the Fair Funding campaign and the comprehensive spending review and delivery of major savings initiatives is increasingly critical in sustaining services and performance levels in the medium term. The report was considered by the Scrutiny Commission on the 31st of October, and the development of the report to include more information around service pressures and risks, the Fair Funding campaign, was generally welcomed, as well as recognition of some of the work going on around the communities theme and to support staff to help reduce sickness, absence, etc. And some areas for scrutiny reports to come forward on certain issues in the future, with a particular note towards the increase in crime that's been experienced recently. So in summary, I wouldn't want the enhanced level of risk highlighted in Part B to take away from the really good things that were delivered last year and the high level of performance of the council, and there are many positives to take from the report. But equally, it is important to note the significant risks and questions moving forward around maintaining performance levels and service sustainability in the medium term. And in that context, I can fully understand why the Cabinet is wanting to keep under consideration all possible opportunities for further efficiency savings rather than further service budget reductions. So in the light of all the above, the recommendation is that you note the overall good progress last year on delivering on the priorities, note the current continued comparative low funding and the performance position, service pressures and areas for continued focus. And to note that the national funding system is now causing serious financial challenges for the council, with major implications for the provision of services and placing pressure on delivery, with risks to service quality, and enhanced monitoring is now required, which we are putting in place, and that the council continues to press its case for fairer funding and to pursue other major savings initiatives. Report's due to go to the council on the 5th of December with the Cabinet's approval.
Thank you, Andy. Very good. I mean, obviously, it's super important that we need to know how look at our performance to make sure we've delivered on priorities in our strategic plan and how we compare to other authorities. So it's a key piece of work you do. Byron, you were going to lead on this.
Yes, and I expect I shall take it through to full council if we agree this afternoon. I think few people understand the sort of revolution that's taken place within this council over the last 6 or 7 years, because we've been running a transformation programme, and the word transformation has been an abused word in local government, and some people have done it, has said they've done it, but they've done it half-heartedly. We've done it because we have in a very assiduous and very, very forensic way. We have gone through and reviewed everything we do in fine detail and completely redesigned our systems over the last 6 or 7 years. And we've taken out unnecessary cost at every step of the way. What that's done to us is it's made us the most efficient council in the country, as now has been confirmed by this study that Empower have produced, and I've got their brochure here with it. And of course they rated us the same last year as well. Now, it doesn't make us the best performing. If we had the money, and we're the lowest funded council, then we could probably lift our performance in every sector to #1, because we could put right some of the things that we know we could do better, and reach that goal. But because we're the lowest funded, to actually mean that we can do an adequate and sometimes a very good service in different sectors, and then bring the two together, which to produce this result, which makes us the most efficient council, I think is something which every person who works for this council and every councillor could be proud of, and I hope that they will be. The worry, of course, is can we keep it up? And if there is continued reduction in our funding, and that's in spite of the statements about the end of austerity, is actually the current projection for local government is to have a further decline in its funding because of the other sectors of the national life of taking out a greater proportion of the share of the national wealth, obviously the health service, which everyone applauds, but also defence and other areas, and policing as well, which is yet to be adjusted, but is likely to have, I suppose, an adjustment to its funding soon. And then we tend to be pushed aside. But in fact, local government, I think, has done the most remarkable job as a whole in England over the last few years. And it has happened, and it's Leicestershire that's done the best job of all. I'd like to thank Andy for putting all this information together, because he's produced an outstanding report which explains it all. And so I'm very, very pleased to move the motions on the Green Order paper and invite the Cabinet to approve it for submission to the Council on the 5th of December.
I'm happy to second it, as well as just checking with the Chief Executive. This isn't a statutory duty that we have to perform, but I certainly think it's well worthwhile that we produce an annual delivery report. I mean, in the old days, I think they were statutory, but I'm glad we still continue, because as I said, if we don't look at our performance, we don't know how we've delivered on priorities, and I think it's very important. I think you do a good bit of work in there, Andy. I've got Blake.
Thanks, Leader. Can I just say for my part how pleased I am to be able to commend this report and support the content, in particular for the Environment and Transport Department. If you read this report, it's in broadly two sections as far as the department's concerned. You've got the highways element, and then I think on page 150 we talk about the environment and waste outputs. It just makes such great reading, and as it's already been pointed out, in context of the resource reductions that we've had to navigate around and manage, it's pretty amazing what we've been able to deliver. Particularly, it shows that we're a listening department, we're a listening council. Through the surveys that we undertake and through the petitions that we receive, we try to react to that in a positive way. And I think some of the schemes that have already been identified through the average speed camera, people out there told us speeding was of concern to them in their communities. We've come up with a scheme that we hope will provide some relief in that respect. People told us that inconsiderate parking outside schools was a problem. We've come up with a scheme. I'm not aware of other councils. In fact, the media approach us and me as lead member at this council because they believe we're trailblazers in so many ways, and I think that's really commendable. But of course we couldn't do this without the quality leadership and management of the corporate management team, and in particular my department, Anne Carruthers, the director, Ian Veers, Joe Gull, and everyone else that works in the department. Christine Radford, my support member, attends a lot of outside body meetings, and we work very well together. But it really is a collaboration of effort, and we're very committed to delivering outcomes for the department, and I think this report reflects the good work that we're doing. And I must pay my respect to our lead member for finance, who holds his Star Chamber meetings, and if it were not for these meetings where we go through line by line the expenditure and where we can tweak, adjust, I do not think we'd be able to meet our output within the resources that we have available. Finally, just one point on metrics. Whilst we might have receded in some respects, for instance, recycling, we are very much dependent on the metrics that we're expected to use. And in the case of waste, for instance, it's measured by tonnages of waste. If we have a particularly good summer where we don't collect as much grass because it hasn't been raining so much and the grass hasn't grown as high, we'll collect less waste, and therefore that translates into a reduced performance in recyclers. So let's take some of the metrics with a pinch of salt. I dearly wish that we could work to different metrics, but by and large it makes exceptionally good reading, and I'm very pleased to support the report, Leader. Thank you.
Very good, Blake. Name checks for your department, praise for our Chancellor, metrics, pinches of salt, you had it all in there. Anybody else? No? So moved by Byron, seconded by me. All in favour? Thank you, Andy. Excellent. 6. Annual Report of the Director of Public Health 2018, Leicestershire's Health, the Challenge of Frailty, and something I didn't know it existed, multimorbidity. So you're going to introduce this, aren't you, Mike? And then I'm going to call Pam. So multimorbidity is where you have 2 or more chronic health conditions.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, indeed. So the purpose of this report is to present my annual report for 2018. The usual reminder that I do have a statutory duty to produce an independent annual report on the health of the population. And as you said, this year's report focuses on twin challenges. One, the growing number of people with some degree of frailty, and the other is the growing number of people with multiple morbidity, which is, as you correctly said, those people living with 2 or more long-term conditions. The report itself presents data on changing population of Leicestershire, the prevalence of individual and multiple health conditions, and there is some data in there on excess winter deaths and place of death. The starting point for me, though, is around population change. We've grown used to talking about the growing numbers of older people in our society, and although I've covered that in part in previous annual reports, I've kind of revisited some of that because I think it's important that we look at that again. So I promise not to do this too often, only twice, but if I can draw your attention firstly to page 232 of the meeting pack, which is page 8 of the report. That shows the growing changes in what we call the population pyramid within Leicestershire. So numbers of men and women in individual 5-year age bands from birth up until 1995, 100, in 2016 and 2041. Now, as I said, we used to talk about pyramids, so you'd start off with a large number of younger people, and then over time, obviously, as people die out, you get a sort of pyramid shape, and you end up with a limited number of people at the very older age groups. Even the population now in 2016, you can see, I don't know what you'd call that, I mean, I think population muffin is probably about the nearest I get to it. with that bulge of people aged 45 up until about 65, the kind of baby boomer, late baby boomer generation. But as you then look towards 2041, I don't know what shape you'd call that, but you can draw your own conclusions about what that growing number of older people, particularly the older ages in women, would mean for demand on health and care services and indeed other public services as well. So population change remains a significant driver for demand for our services and for health services, but the purpose of the report is to switch it a bit and to talk about multiple morbidity. Now, it's handy for me that earlier on this week there was national coverage around the increasing number of younger people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. 25 years ago when I started, I don't think we'd have seen any under 17s really with type 2 diabetes. So I've given some information in the report on growing numbers of people with things like diabetes in that one. But then the other page to draw your attention to is on page 21 of the report, which is page 245 of the meeting pack, which are our estimates of the number of people who are multiply morbid, so 2 or more health conditions. Inevitably, there is a relationship with age. So on the left-hand side, you can see that once we get to ages 80, 85 plus, both in men and women, there's around about 80% of people will be living with 2 or more health conditions. But in terms of absolute numbers, it's the numbers in those kind of blocks on the right-hand side there, which to some extent are the scary bit. So if you add up the numbers of people aged 65 and over, which are living with 2 or more chronic conditions, that comes to about 77,000 people in Leicestershire above 65 with 2 or more conditions. But if you add up the numbers of people who are under 65, that comes to around about 75,000 people. So to categorise multimorbidity and frailty as just being about older people is wrong, and also shows the demand for health and social care services that we could expect to see coming down the line as those people increasingly live to older age. So it's a problem, not just for older people, but for all parts of society. What do we do about it? Well, I make a number of recommendations. It's not for the annual report to sort of go into depth about the good work we do, but Andy talked about things around health and care services like integrated locality teams. And I think that's something increasingly we need to support health and care in thinking around how do we treat people as an individual, not as a collection of individual diseases. So it's easy to say it, but there's clearly a great deal of work. And to some extent, I think children and adult services have always done that within a council setting, but the health service have maybe got a bit further to go around treating people holistically, to use a buzzword. And then the key bit for me is our role, given our public health responsibilities, around helping people age healthily. And that's something that starts at, in younger age. So a number of recommendations around tackling social isolation and loneliness. I talk about promoting our social prescribing model, so recognising that GPs have a key role in promoting community empowerment, community involvement to keep them independent, and we've got a good model within Leicestershire. Specific work with older people around preventing and reducing falls. Crucially for me, promoting physical activity throughout life to stay supple, stay strong throughout life. And lastly, work around supporting carers, so for those who do have caring responsibility, that we keep their health in good nick as well. Lastly, it was considered by the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 7th of November. Comments from the committee are in Part B at paragraphs 19 and 20, and it comes to Cabinet before being considered by the full Council on the 5th of December meeting. Lastly, for me, I'd just like to thank Natalie Davison in Data and Business Intelligence once again. Like last year, she's responsible for all the infographics that underpin the report, so all the good bits are hers, all the bad bits are probably mine. Thank you, Chair.
Good bit of work, Mike. I've got Pam.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I would just like to say this is an excellent report. It's easy to read. It gives you plenty of up-to-date information. It also gives you things to think about for the future, what Mike has just said with the population changes. And it's not just health we need to look at. It's housing, it's isolation, loneliness. And that's why we've started to look at these sorts of things. And we're running a conference a week today, actually, about loneliness and isolation. Some of it based upon the Joe Cox thing that the government were doing when Joe was alive and started it. And we've had a great take-up. When we first talked about this conference, I thought it'd just be a little gathering of people who've got an interest in it. But actually, Leicestershire University have got involved, and we've actually got 100 people who've signed up to come to that conference next week, which is, I think, is a a very good recommendation for the work that we do, that we can attract that many people to come to a conference like that that we're putting on. I think Mike's coined a very good phrase, which is healthy ageing. And we do have to get people to start and look about the way they live their lives and what they do. And you needn't make huge changes to what you do, but just little tweaks and just little bits, and making sure that you look after yourself properly. And we mustn't forget those people who are caring for people that have got health problems, and that's why we've done a carer strategy, which is really good. I have no hesitation in recommending this report and look forward to it coming to full council in December.
Excellent, thank you. Richard? Okay, we have no other speakers. Thanks for your good work, Mike. All in favour? Thank you. You're staying for the next one, I think, Mike, aren't you? Development of a new model for homelessness and housing support. This is 269 to 274. Mike's going to introduce it again. County Council is not responsible for homelessness support. We have a duty to assist the districts and to consider it in our social care and public health approach. So if you can say a few words about it, Mike, I'll then call Pam.
Thank you, Leader. So as you say, actually, sorry, Mr. Blunt, I think your microphone's still on. So the purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet's approval to consult the new model for homelessness and housing support. As the paper sets out, as you've said, district councils have the statutory responsibility for homelessness support, including the prevention of homelessness under acts such as the Homelessness Reduction Act 2017. However, the County Council has provided for a number of years a commission service as set out in paragraphs 20 to 22 of the report. The service, which overall is provided by the Nottingham Community Housing Association, comprises an in-reach support service, so support for those who are currently housed within the Falcon Centre Homeless Hostel in Loughborough, and an outreach floating support service for those at risk of homelessness, which should operate throughout Leicestershire. The current service has aims to enable service users to develop and maintain their independence. Whilst recognising that the Council is not the housing authority, I think it's important to recognise that from a public health point of view, we do have a responsibility to the homeless population that has significantly worse health experience than the average, than the general population, which I've set out in paragraph 18. This is particularly so for those things that are associated with the risk of homelessness, obvious ones such as mental health issues and drug and alcohol dependency being amongst them. As always, though, as we heard in earlier items, there is a financial imperative to redesign and save money and transform where we can, and that's driven the proposed new model as set out in paragraphs 23 through to 28. So the proposal is we decommission the outreach element of the current service and recruit a number of specialist local area coordinators into the County Council. This firstly would maintain the in-reach service, so we would continue to provide support at the point of need for those living within the temporary hostel accommodation. But the proposed redesign of the outreach element would align the support provided for the homeless with the target operator model for prevention within Leicestershire that was set out in the strategy approved by Cabinet back in 2016. Local area coordinators, which Cabinet I'm sure are familiar with, are already an integral part of that Leicestershire prevention model, providing support to many groups of vulnerable people throughout the county. By recruiting a number of specialist local area coordinators to work with those at risk of homelessness, they would work closely with district council colleagues. So in that way, we'd hope to recognise the differing responsibilities of local government whilst putting together, from a user point of view, as near a seamless service as we could provide to those either homeless or at risk. Therefore, hopefully avoiding duplication and avoiding potential confusion for service users. In addition to providing specialist support, the homelessness local area coordinators would provide training to the rest of that team to tackle the key factors for homelessness outside of things like mental health, so obvious things along the lines of debt, debt advice being one of them, neighbourhood disputes being another. By doing so, we'd hope to realise a saving of around £200,000 as part of the medium-term financial strategy, but as I say, it would maintain a revised service for those either within the hostel accommodation or throughout the whole of Leicestershire, working closely with district councils. The consultation itself would be a 12-week targeted consultation with service users, groups and organisations looking to report back to Cabinet in spring of 2019 with a final model for approval. I think the recommendations otherwise are as per the Green Order paper.
Thank you. Pam?
Thank you very much. Yes, homelessness is something that is very difficult, not just for single people, but also families. And as we've already said, the district councils have the responsibility, but we've had a responsibility to look after the health of these people. And I think by looking at redesigning the service the way that we have done, we're actually making it more community-based, because we've got these local area coordinators in districts. They know who these vulnerable people are, and people within the community know who the coordinators are, so that they can go to them for help. And I think one of the prime things is that we'll be there to help people and assist people before they actually become homeless, when there is a danger that may happen. And I think the redesigning of this will work extremely well. And I look forward to the consultation taking place and us being able to put this into motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Moved and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Okay, where's Roderick? There he is. Okay, improving connectivity within Watermead Country Parks, new footbridge and cycleway, 275 to 282. It's pretty much what it says on the tin. If you've walked it now, it's pretty awful. You have to walk down the side of that industrial estate, between the industrial estate and the marina. Yes. It's not safe. It's dirty. Not in the best interests of encouraging people to get out and walk. And whenever I go down it there, it's always pretty busy. So this, I think, Roderick, will help health and people get around there. But I'll listen to you.
Yeah, I hope so. Chair, thank you. I would agree, and I would see this as a great opportunity. The purpose of the report is to actually set out a proposal for a new footbridge and cycleway. To improve connections across Watermead country parks, and seeks approval to progress the project and for the County Council to contribute funding towards the footbridge and the associated paths. If I take you to the recommendations, that 750,000 is allocated for the construction of the footbridge and the associated footpaths and cycleways, subject to the City Council agreeing to an equivalent amount, that the Director of Corporate Resources, in consultation with the Director of Law and Governance, is authorised to take all necessary steps to progress the procurement and programme, and it's recommended that the continued partnership working between both councils be welcomed and supported. If I can take you to resource implications, initial feasibility work has been carried out, and although we don't have a detailed design at the moment, we've got indicative costs of around 2 million. As mentioned, the 1.5 million it's proposed will be shared with City and County Council contributions, and the City Mayor has agreed that a budget of 500,000 could be made available from the approved Local Growth Fund programme from the River Soar Grand Union Canal Access Project. It's worth noting that as the bridge is actually on county land, it would be adopted by the County Council once built, so a provision will be made within the overall budget towards the future maintenance. If I can just build on what you said, Chair, and just provide a little bit of context. I think within the national context, through austerity, country parks have suffered through reduced funding and lack of investment. Notwithstanding that, I think that the County Council and the City have got some excellent parks, well managed and well maintained. But the bridge, the concept of the bridge is actually a huge opportunity to build on strength, to build on that partnership working and enhance the good services that we already deliver through our well-managed parks. It's probably worth drawing on the fact that we have been in partnership working with the City Council across Watermead since 2016. Three things I would pull out. Officers at a local level have been working in close collaboration since then. Recently, we erected the signage across both parks, joining them up and bearing the joint logo of City and County Council. And then the bridge as the next step is a huge opportunity to move it forward. I think I should draw out some of the rewards and also touch on some of the risks of the proposed project. Huge rewards, which I think should be fairly self-evident. improved connectivity, encourage greater use of the parks, building on what Mike spoke about earlier in developing and promoting better health and improving the economy. There are some risks around it. The development of the bridge does include some private land. We have begun initial discussions with the private landowners, and although we have agreement in principle, at this stage we only have that in principle, but we've been developing good discussions. The area was previously sand and gravel pit, so possible soft ground conditions will be encountered, but they will have to be managed during the programme. There is flood risk around that site, but again, we've already begun discussions with the Environment Agency and the Canal and River Trust, and I think we'd also manage those. So if I can just bring you to the next steps, providing we get agreement from Cabinet once funding is secured, both councils would initiate a procurement exercise, develop a programme and bring in a contractor to commence a design and build.
Light off, Roderick. Well, it is exciting. I mean, it's always been there, and it's always been one park, but it's been run differently. Bits have been run differently. And when I went down with you and the chief in 2016 to meet the mayor and walk it was crying out for like working together, you know, getting the signage and getting it as one big park. And even then when we were down there, we were saying, you know, I know the little walkway's bad, but everybody was saying, wouldn't it be nice to have the bridge across the water? You know, 'cause it just makes it so much more attractive to people going there. So although it's taken us 2 and a bit years to get here, I think it's been well worth it. Because if you go there now, it does feel like one park, and for a member of the public, you don't really bothered whether there's a dotted line halfway through where you're going from the city park to our park. It wants to be one park, one experience, and even things like us both treating the car park in a similar fashion has helped. So I'm really happy with it, and I'm happy to personally move the recommendation. I think, Pam, you're going to speak.
Yes, I think it's great. In a previous job, I used to co-chair with Sir Peter Salisbury the Union Canal committee, and I know we spent quite a few meetings where we discussed Watermead and how much better it would be if we could connect the two with the bridge. So I'm really happy that that's happening. I always look at Watermead as a bit of a green lung for the city. It's there just outside the city, but it's a wonderful facility for families to go together because there's cycle routes, there's footpaths, and you know, the possibility of seeing boats on the canal, which lots of families really enjoy doing. So I have no hesitation in seconding this proposal.
Thank you. Moved by me, seconded by Pam. All in favour? Thank you. Well done, Roderick. Agenda item 9, items referred from overview and scrutiny. There are none. Any urgent items? There are none. So that brings us to the private section of the meeting. So I have to move that under item 11, that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 10 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I move. All in favour? Thank you. I know, I've just got to wait. Is it off yet, Jenny? Okay.